Hello, friends, and welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm your host, Megan Colleen Johnson, and I'm here to guide us in raw conversations about thriving in life and work, so that together we can step into personal agency and stop letting life happen to us. We'll cover topics like health, boundaries, communication, finances, and worthiness. That badass business you've been dreaming of, it's not so far off. The desire to wake up feeling fully alive, it's right around the corner. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited for today's conversation. I really need to come up with some additional words because I feel like I'm always excited, but I am genuinely just honored for this conversation today. Before I get ahead of myself, I'm recording from my office. I actually have a chai tea in front of me today. My husband and I went out for a drive and picked up some coffees, and I got a chai tea. It's been kind of overcast today, so I've got a little bit of like sunlight, but it's kind of like going in and out between the clouds. And I'm just feeling very, very content today and honored, like I said, to be stepping into this conversation. So today I have with me Ash Johns. And just to share a little bit, I'm going to share her professional bio here. So Ash is a spiritual and conscious business coach, an ancestral healer, a speaker, and creator of Spiritual B School, a community-focused program designed to help entrepreneurs do business better and in alignment with their soul's purpose. She is devoted to supporting visionaries, creatives, and soul searchers. Ash guides the willing in discovering their unique path to freedom while healing what she believes is our greatest reoccurring trauma as humans, surviving. She has an honors degree in advertising and entrepreneurial marketing from Murray State University and is a certified Psychosynthesis Coach, Reiki Master and Spiritualist. She believes teachers are also always students. So hopefully I said psychosynthesis correctly because that is a new word for me. But Ash, it is such an honor to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much, Megs, for having me. And yes, you did say it right.
Awesome. So I'd love if you could just share a little bit of where you're recording from, what you have in front of you, set the stage for listeners as we're conversing.
Yeah, so I am recording from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in my spiritual office. I work from home. And what I have in front of me is really my ritual space. It's a cover over my desk that I got through travels in Peru. I have some herbal tea in front of me, and I keep a plant nearby. It looks like it's a fern, I think. I don't know. I just let the plants choose me. As well as my crystals and my astrology journal/planner.
I love that. Whenever I've seen on Instagram, you on your stories, whenever you're sharing, I feel like you do usually have some beautiful greenery in the background. So I feel like I can kind of picture where you're coming from, and I love that.
Yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. So I would love to just start out with having you share a little bit of your story. How did you start? Where did you come from? What did you really have to kind of reclaim in order to step into this life and work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm glad first off, I just love everything about your podcast and this story of reclamation, this exploration of reclamation, because I think that that's what healing is. It's reclaiming, calling back, remembering, realigning ourselves to who we've always been and who we came here to be on this earth. And so for me, it's a story of remembering and truly living and knowing that I belong exactly how I am, which is a creative, spiritual being who's out to live her best life and inspire others to do the same in the name of freedom and connection. So for me, that story is growing up. I was born in Detroit. My mom was a single mom. I have an older brother, and she married my stepfather because she's like, I do want to be married, and I've got 2 kids to care for. And I remember being a little girl asking her, "Who are you really, and what did you want to be in your life before you became a mom?" And she couldn't really give me that answer or any answer. She just said, "I love being a mom, and I don't know, maybe I would have been a nurse." And that was the end of the conversation. But my reclamation journey started early in the sense that I kept journals of my life, things that made me excited, things that made me sad, reoccurring patterns and arguments in my family. And I remember that being one of the entries of being like, what is my dream if my mom doesn't have one of her own? So along the years, I would just keep track of these little anecdotes, if you will, to know that I wanted to heal or do something differently. And that took me through having a career in advertising and marketing, becoming really depressed and being like, this is not for me, even though I'm talented and I'm doing a great job. But there's something that doesn't align with me in this industry and the world that I'm in, and what is it? And so I went down a personal healing journey that really started, I want to say way before I quit advertising in 2012, and has continued to evolve to today and who I am today.
I love that. And I know I've listened to, I don't remember if it was other interviews or some might've been on your stories, how you've shared in different places, kind of what that marketing career looked like for you and just how that also influences the work you do in Spiritual B School, which is really unique. And I love that. And it's really interesting to hear as well, how you've also been able to look back in your old journals and to kind of see that progression of how all of those different like journaling and like noticing and connecting to self has led you to the work you do now. That's really, really beautiful. I love that so much.
Yeah, thanks. It's always been there. We just allow, family and schooling and other people's expectations, society. I mean, we know the deal, right? By now, we've heard of all of this, but when it comes to really understanding that in your own lived experience and choosing yourself or choosing differently, that's always the really challenging part. So yeah, it was reclaiming creativity, trusting my spiritual abilities as a kid, because I would see spirits, feel spirits, very sensitive. I dreamed of being friends with all kinds of different people. Like even my imaginary friends were different colors and came from different places. And I dreamed of abundance in a way that made everyone feel good, not getting a paycheck or having money. And then everyone would be happy for a moment and then sad later. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love how you really started to dive into some of the really unique parts of or at least what I seem to notice as being a unique part of your work is that you see spirits and you work with like ancestors and things like that. So I would love to kind of take that and move into our primary topic, which is reclaiming your freedom. And I'd love for you to just kind of share what does reclaiming your freedom mean to you? Yeah, let's just start there.
Yeah, I think reclaiming freedom is realizing that we're already free, even within systems and experiences that are hurtful, disarming, confronting, traumatic. Like, even in spite of all of those, or with all of those things happening, we are free. We have choice. We can choose what we relate to. We can choose to behave in a certain way. We can choose to go places. It might not look like the person next to you, but we all have some type of agency and privilege and ability to do something. So I'm an 80s baby. So I grew up watching Sesame Street and Barney and Friends and reading Rainbow and Mr. Rogers. And so I just never forget how all of those different children's programming would talk about your imagination. And if you can dream it, then you can do it. And I just never let go of that. I don't care what I've gone through, and I've gone through a lot. We all have stories, but I'm telling you, I've gone through a lot. And I always come back to, if I can think about it, if I can dream it, if I can see it, if I can feel it, if I have emotion associated with it, then I can do it. And similarly, if I have emotions around something that is negative or it's hurting me or is causing me pain, then in what ways can I let go of it? Because I have that choice and that power to do. So, I see right now, especially as it relates to social justice and inclusivity and healing. And, right now we're recording this in the time of COVID. So there's a lot of unrest around protests and civil rights and liberties. And I'm just like, you know what? In spite of all of this stuff, I can choose how I respond. I can choose what I want to do. And every choice does have a consequence, whether we perceive that as positive or negative. My ancestral roots of how my African people got to this land, I still have a choice on how I move forward to bring joy and legacy and honor to their names and through my being, through my living, through my presence and my energy. So yeah, reclaiming is being like, listen, all of these things are true. And it's also true that I can do what I want with all of this.
Yeah. Oh, that is so good. So good. I would love, could you share a little bit more about your work specifically with ancestral things, because that is something I have not had anybody on the podcast to talk about yet. And I would just love if you could share kind of part of what your work is with that, and how you support people in stepping into freedom and reclaiming their freedom. I don't even have the words to talk about it because I'm not educated in that area whatsoever.
Word. Yeah, thanks for asking me that. Actually, there's a lot of different ways of looking at ancestral veneration, ancestral connection or reconnection, communication, and the bigger theme of ancestral healing. And, I'm really glad you brought this up because it's been sitting on my mind to do something bigger with this, and I haven't taken action on it. And I can just feel it in my heart as I'm getting ready to share more. There's different areas of ancestral healing, honoring your ancestors and doing genealogical work or family tree work is ancestral healing. Looking at repeating patterns of behavior and relationship dynamics within your family of origin, blood origin, is family healing. Going into herbalism or like traditional ways of healing and eating and cooking and dancing is family healing or ancestral healing. And then the way that I work is actually connecting to spirits of ancestors, because science has even proven outside of the spiritual and occult world, science has proven that consciousness continues. And so sometimes folks are talking about inclusivity and diversity and healing and like anti-racism, anti-oppression and things like that. And that's all from a personal spiritual or personal understanding perspective. We're forgetting that we have hundreds of thousands of ancestors before us that maybe didn't have those same beliefs or understandings around abundance and respecting women and respecting people of color, or having right relationship to people of other origins, whether they are considered white or whatever it might be. And I'm using that framework because we're very much so in America and in Western civilization, where there's a very huge tension or epicenter around racial tension and power dynamics. And so what I do is, particularly around abundance in business and people stepping into their purpose creatively, is going through the lineage, helping people track back through trance work and connecting with an ancestor before troubled times, before, women were treated a certain way, or before we were struggling financially and poor and distrusting of the land and not on our original lands. Like, how do we connect with those, or actually connecting with those ancestors and asking them to step in and come into your life? You facilitate a relationship with their wisdom and ask them to guide you or support you, and to work through those family wounds and traumas that's been passed on intergenerationally for hundreds, thousands, or whatever number of years. And so when you do that, it allows you to really be clear on human, but we're all humaning in some type of similar way for very similar reasons. And spirit can come in and really support us in evolving and elevating and coming into the trueness of who we are in this particular lifestyle or lifetime, I should say. So ancestral healing, as it relates to literally dealing with spirits or the dead, psycho pump work, helping folks crossover who are not fully into the ancestralized world, is the work that I have been gifted and then have explored and researched on my own. But I've been a medium my whole life, and I didn't know that's what it was when I was a kid. I would just have spirits and ancestors bothering me in my sleep, and I would sleepwalk and talk with them, and my family would have to catch me and like ask me questions. And it was more than just night terrors, because it was a whole entire experience, and I would come back with information that would always come to be true, because the spirits and the ancestors were, convening or intervening on my behalf or somebody else's. So I find sometimes folks are trying to step into their purpose and they keep having these repeating patterns, and no matter how many times they go into therapy or they have a coach, or, they go through different programs and this training, and it just keeps coming up. And it's personal, it's ancestral, and it is collective in that order. And so, I really help folks try to pinpoint that in their blood lineage, and then work through it both spiritually and physically, and learn in your behavior.
Wow, that is so interesting. Thank you so much for diving into that and in such beautiful detail as well, just kind of how that works and how you go about that. I feel like it's so interesting because, again, as someone who kind of comes from, I grew up in a conservative Christian background. And so I've kind of more recently deconstructed from a lot of that. However, it is still very new for me to be open to and to consider a lot of these different things. But with my own like personal research in reclamation and healing, I feel like it becomes more prominent that there are so many ancestral items that need to be healed and that need to be reclaimed because they've sat kind of unnoticed or unheard for so long.
Yeah. And I mean, every time someone thinks of ancestral healing or ancestral work, there's a lot of emphasis on the negative because, I mean, look at history, right? Like all of us have, even in one generation back, we could be like, oh man, there was so much turmoil around this, or like we moved across country and my mom separated us, estranged from, or whatever it might be. But there's also ancestral blessings. Like there is talent. There is like understanding that's been forgotten that is totally there to be remembered and harnessed in this time. Especially, as I said, we're recording this in the time of COVID. Like, we have ancestors who have survived. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Other pandemics and like catastrophes. And so calling on them or having them active in our space consciously to give us wisdom, guidance, tips on herbalism or how to maintain living less stress in your body and around you because they know is wonderful. And also simultaneously to avoid things they might have done. Maybe they went totally into survival mode and that caused some type of personal and collective harm or community harm. Hey, ancestors, I'm flipping out and I realize it's not just me. It's like feeling all of you guys' stuff for 4 generations back who survived the potato famine in Ireland or something like that. And so we'll see ourselves repeating patterns and don't realize that it's not just our own. And to your point, I was raised Christian, Pentecostal Christian. So, it's different types of Christianity. But I really love when people talk about or bring that up as far as like the occult and spirits and ancestors and honoring the dead or having a relationship with the dead who influence our living life right now. And, there's lots of that in the Bible, which is really, as I decolonized and like walked away from Christianity and now have come circle around to Christianity as a religion and some of the things that are just tried and true in the book of wisdom. Like there's a lot of information in there that's applicable, but seeing the ways in which I can lead my life based on things that are in the Bible and in other sacred texts, as opposed to the control, fire and brimstone, this is evil, when Jesus himself had done some pretty amazing things with and for the dead. So glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I love that. It is easy to forget, as I feel like I'm still relatively new in how I communicate about my deconstruction, but it is so true that the Bible holds so many insights as a beautiful, historical, and rich document full of wisdom. There is a lot of engagement with the dead and very interesting to point out. I love that.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm curious. Before I dive into my next question, I actually just wanted to mention this because I think it's really interesting. I've never mentioned this even really to my family too much, definitely not publicly, but I think it's interesting talking about this so I use the name Megs Colleen as kind of my brand name. And Colleen is my middle name, which was my aunt's name. And she passed away when I was in high school. But it was so interesting to me because I always felt really connected to her and I never really understood why. I actually have a little bottle of hers that I keep frankincense in at my desk, and I usually use that before I go on calls. But it's so interesting to me when I think of ancestry and why ancestral healing is so important and things like that. And it is I think it's very unexplainable to someone who maybe doesn't have the same gifts that you have, but there's still this deep connection with different ancestors. And it's this kind of unfolding of, okay, why is this connection there? How can I honor that connection? What did she have unfinished that I can then finish? I don't know, different things like that, where I do think it's interesting. And Megs Colleen has been my brand name since I was in high school. Again, just really interesting things that I've noticed that I was that never clicked in my brain that I chose Megs Colleen when I was 14 years old. Pretty bizarre. So anyways.
Totally amazing. Just a little bit more riff on that is we have relationships with people in our family before we were in the relationships that we're in right now, right? So for example, my brother, the first brother underneath me, so the firstborn after me, was definitely my son in a past life. The kindred relationship that we have is so deep, and I can feel him. Sometimes he calls me and he's like, hey, I just really need to let you know, like he looks to me in a way that is completely mother and son, that we're brother sister this time. And so, there's different, depending on your cultural background, there's different beliefs around your family constellation and how folks come back and how you're in a relationship. And, sometimes father, daughter were husband and wife before and things like that. And aunts and nieces can be sisters previously or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, it's really cool to think of, there's a reason we've chosen our families, that our blood family ancestry, and the kind of things that we want to, to do to honor them and to keep their legacy going, and to also maybe atone for some of the things that they may have done or didn't do that was totally on their to-do list in this lifetime. It could be considered in certain cultures to be a bit of a curse on your family line to not fulfill your purpose. And so when someone goes through a catastrophic, whatever, moving away from your land, being separated, having to hide a child because it was out of wedlock or whatever it might be, and then you're in survival mode, so you never really live up to your greatest potential in that lifetime. And so sometimes we inherit that as the next generation or the person closest to them to kind of carry that on, or to in some way remember that. So when they come back again, if you believe in incarnation, they can pick up where they left off.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. So I'm curious, as you're kind of talking about purpose, that kind of leads into my next question, where a lot of people listening are creatives, they're visionaries, they're people who are, starting their own business or have their own business. And I'm curious, how do you see like reclaiming your freedom supporting people as they're stepping into their purpose?
Oh, yeah. I love that question. So it's like you really can't, I believe, and can't is a word I don't like to use a lot, but for the sake of the limitations of the English language, really can't step into your purpose if you don't believe that you're free to do it. And so the more that you know who you are and where you come from and your reason for being and what lights up your spirit, you can really accept who you are. And then you can have the courage and the compassion for messing it up along the way, or like fumbling along the way in your becoming process. But then you can actually lean into what you're here to do, So a lot of this purchasing multiple, coaching sessions and programs and seminars and doing all these things is because we don't believe that we have the authority to live in our freedom and bring the healing, the magic, the wellness, the creativity, the art, the words that this world needs, and that you feel pouring out of yourself in your own unique way. We don't feel that we have the authority to do so. And so I think that this is funny coming from, I am a coach, I'm a healer, I do strategy for people who are visionaries and change makers and soul seekers wanting to do business differently. And so I love the idea of like putting myself out of a job because people don't need to hire me because they've done their work and they're trusting the fumbling through life, and that you still have something to give, even if you have skinned your knees and busted your lip, in the process. Yeah. So I think it's really important. It's paramount. It's required to continue leaning into this becoming, like really embodying your own freedom, reclaiming who you truly are unapologetically, so that you can bring forth and be who you're supposed to be in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's good. And then I'd love to kind of move into some implementation stuff with that. So with reclaiming your freedom being so important to stepping into your purpose and to living a life full of purpose, what are some tips? And I know we talked quite a bit about our ancestors and such, but what are some tips that you would recommend for people who are seeking to reclaim their freedom?
Yeah. So my recipe, if you will, for reclaiming your freedom is to really know who you are, get in touch with your ancestors or understand your ancestral agreements, and to lean into your agreement, like really your birthright to be abundant, and not just abundant in money, but just abundant in everything that you do, like abundance in your smile, and abundance in your relationships, abundance in your resilience and your creativity, like all of the ways that you get to expand in the world. world, expanding and contracting the world. And so practically starting with who you are is, and this kind of goes back to you checking to see if you said psychosynthesis correctly. I really love the coaching methodology of psychosynthesis because it is a spiritual psychology that focuses from Robert Assagioli, an Italian psychologist, who believe that we develop these different personalities or parts of ourselves, if you will, who can help us in fulfilling our true purpose, like the who we truly are. And they also can hinder or hijack or like just totally blunder what we're here to do. And we'll keep living with them or as them, not really in tune with who we truly are, the core of who we are. And so knowing who you are is literally asking moment to moment, like, what part of this is me? If you're, for example, creating some social media posts to share your story or to put out your program or, share your new artist piece or, whatever might be exhibit, and you're feeling this hesitation or you're like questioning yourself and all this self-sabotage and self-doubt and imposter syndrome, it's like, what part of this is me? Like truly, what part of this is me? And everyone will say simple things like, oh, I'm just afraid. Okay, afraid of what? And who is afraid? And essentially, when you keep leaning into and asking those questions, you'll uncover that you have multiple parts of you that are not true you. And the more that you get to know those different parts of you, you can see when they are taking over to protect you or taking over to guide you in a certain way. And they tend to guide or take over in a way that is counterproductive and counterintuitive to what they really want. And so, if you're interested, I think psychosynthesis is an amazing practice that you don't have to work with a coach to explore it. You can just look up Robert Assagioli and just Google psychosynthesis. There's some amazing books on it that you can just do a personal discovery of who you are. And it'll bring you back into things that you've forgotten about yourself or things that you pushed away or deemed terrible. Like I've had someone that was like, oh, that's the bossy part of me. And like, everyone tells me that, yeah, right? Like, oh, that's bad. And it's like, or she's the one who's like, this is what I want. Like, that's a woman in, like get her to love on her and get her to align with what your soul's calling is. That's fantastic, So that's first tip I can say is get into who you are. And it never ends. It will never end.
Yeah. In some ways, it sounds relatively similar to kind of the concept of talking with your inner children. I say that and I'm doing air quotes because I don't know, it just sounds such a funny thing to say, but like if you're following like the holistic psychologist and just kind of this in psychology in general, when you think of like having an inner child, in some ways it sounds kind of similar where you're asking like, what does my inner child need? And like when that bossy part of you seems to come up, is it like an inner child version, like who, did know exactly what she wanted and who she wanted to be, and how can that person be like reintegrated into adulthood? Does that sound like it does that resonate? Does that sound kind of similar?
It is always compared to inner child work, and I think that's great work. There is a nuance to it. It's a bit different. I think especially because people are becoming more, especially with social media, becoming more aware of like inner child work. So everyone will kind of default to, oh, that's my inner child of this. And sometimes that creates resistance because people don't want to explore or go back to inner child trauma or experiences where to me, subpersonality, understanding and processing, it has a nuance. It feels a little bit more different because you could develop any parts of these parts of you at any time in your life, and they evolve and they split out into many different things. So it doesn't have to be childhood. There's parts of me that were completely instilled when I was going through my advertising, I call it initiation program of like try to prove myself and doing all these things like the prover in me. And she operates in a way that I did not have as a child. So inner child work is a fantastic place to start. It's very, very deep work. I find subpersonality work and psychosynthesis to expand beyond that and to do it in a way that connects to your true self, like the core you, your higher self, your soul's calling, and to see how those parts work together. So it's similar yet different.
Yeah, that's helpful to know kind of the difference. I feel like my assumption was to connect them, but that's helpful to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper.
Totally.
Yeah, That's awesome.
So the next part is, asking some questions about your ancestry. What are the common gifts that you see running through your family that maybe you're not harnessing? What are the wounds or the trauma or the repeating unsavory patterns that you're like, this has got to go? It's this kind of analysis of what do I want to keep and leverage and what do I need to let go? Because I have a body of people that I belong to, but they don't run my life, And so how do I get into right relationship with my ancestors and my ancestral agreements, both wounds and blessings, is just doing that dive. And sometimes it starts off with literally just asking some questions with lived family members. If they're older, sometimes they're resistant to that, and doing some genealogical work, or just sitting down and being like, hey, I know y'all are around, even if I never knew my grandmother on my father's side, which is true, I have inherited and I behave in ways that people who knew her are like, wow, you are just like her. And I'm like, really? That's interesting because I never was around this woman. So when you think about the genes, like in your actual lived cells, there's information that's been stored. There's also energies, spiritual thoughts, beliefs that are inherited. So yeah, ask some questions around your ancestors with the idea of clearing some space and claiming some things that's part of your freedom.
I am curious because I don't remember exactly where this was, but at one point I heard someone discussing this a little bit, and I was curious from your perspective, what about people who are adopted or may not have access to kind of asking those ancestral questions?
Yeah, that's a great, great question. So, and actually the example I just gave with my grandmother gives you a really good idea of that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I personally did not know or have a relationship with my biological father until I was 15, and I never met my grandmother. So I was not raised by them. I wasn't around them. I was pseudo adopted by my stepfather. So I'm sharing blood and energetic lineage with my biological father, and then energetic and learned behavior or ancestry through my stepfather. So the thing is, regardless to who you were raised with or by and what culture you're around, your blood ancestry or your blood ancestors, they're going to walk with you and be around you no matter what. You might have acquired some other people on the way since you were in another culture or raised by other folks. So if you can't ask those more direct questions, then I would say it's perfect to go into the meditative space or work with a practitioner who are ancestral healing practitioner or ancestral lineage healing practitioner. If you're familiar with the folks over at Ancestral Medicine who can help you spiritually and energetically ask some of those questions and get in tune with your people. So what I love about the spiritual aspect of ancestral healing and ancestral connection is that there are no secrets. Like there's nothing that cannot be found out when it's time and when they're willing to share that information with you. Physical documents and names on this physical plane in this world can be lost or burned or removed or whatever. But the spiritual knowing, those, I want to say files, are never lost. So yeah. Don't be discouraged if you are adopted or estranged, or you can still find information.
And then number 3, so your abundance. I'm actually really excited about this one because I feel like I have been using the term abundance a lot. So I'm really interested to see how you break down this last step.
Yeah. So I think this ends up sliding into like worthiness work, which I don't consider myself to be an expert in, but I do loathe the term charge what you're worth. And I'm like invaluable. Like, how do I put an invaluable number? So a basic way is like when you think about abundance, I do this really, it's so silly, it's so practical, but it's really fun. And I wanted to make this one a little bit more light, is I take my weight, which is always very fluctuating, side note, and I multiply it times the current price of gold. I am worth my weight in gold. And gold price is always, moving around, but it's a precious thing that we will forever value on this planet, I think. And so it's my way of just like lightening this whole thing around abundance. Like the earth is my abundance. And if I can align that with something that I really love, which is gold, it allows me to think of there's an infinite amount of ways that I can have abundance in my life and that the earth is always providing for me. All I have to do is remember that I'm worth it. And the fact that I'm on this earth at this time that I am. So a lot of times I'll sit with my higher self, my ancestors, and the earth on the ground and just speak all together about what I would like, what I want, and just feel into what's approved. How can they help me reclaim or get those things? And through that dialogue and having that time with myself, I kid you not, I always get off the ground and be like, man, I'm pretty amazing. I'm well taken care of. And I am always receiving exactly what I deserve and what I need abundantly.
Hmm. That's so beautiful. I love kind of that picture. You're making me just want to like go sit outside. I've been working on my business today and just some different things. And I have like some documents to the side here. And I feel like just hearing you talk about that makes me want to just take my little, bottle of frankincense oil, take my papers and just like sit out in the dirt and just sit with things for a little while and kind of call that in as best I can, just kind of with my knowledge, and do my best to connect in that way.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. You just kind of show up in your heart and in the space and ask the questions. And sometimes when I'm sitting there, I literally think of all the times that something abundantly amazing has happened in my life. Like, oh, wow, this person who I never knew would be my friend. I super cherish them. Like, that's abundance. I deserve that. That's why I came, or I asked for that person. Like, there's so many things that we can assign abundance to give us the evidence that we are capable and worthy and totally deserving of all the good stuff. Like, it's literally in our birthright to thrive, be safe, be taken care of in this world. And it's only because of our disconnection from the land, from the elementals, from trusting and being okay with the cycle of death and rebirth, literally and figuratively, that we think that there is scarcity in this world. So even when I'm without, I just sit and be like, look at all the great shit I do have. Thanks, y'all, for bringing it to me. Thanks, me, for being here to receive it. Thanks, me, for having the spirit and the skills and the soul to show up again and again to receive and to, make what I want in this world.
Yeah. I love that. I also did want to circle back. So when you said you multiply your weight times like with gold, do you use that in anything practically, or do you just kind of do that for your own kind of mental practice?
No, I do it for my own mental practice. I don't take that and apply it to conscious business strategies or pricing strategies or any of that, just because the numbers would be wild. The only way that it does become a little bit more practical is in my lifetime. I want to actually made, like, collectively, bottom line, at my death, I want someone to be able to look at my life and be like, oh yeah, she did make her weight in gold from her first job at McDonald's all the way to the end of her career as a healer and coach and strategist. Ash, like, she really did that. And she gave this amount of that money to other people. So that's the only practical way. I do go into different ways of doing business in a way that's accessible, but also abundant through diversity pricing models and moving through 4 ways of living, essentially moving through surviving all the way to building models when it comes to those of us who are coaches, therapists. I call us spiritual entrepreneurs, to price in a way that is abundant for us and abundant for others. So yeah, I totally believe it. But the gold one doesn't exactly go like, pan over.
Yeah. I was just curious because I was like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of anyone ever doing that before. So I had to ask, but I love that practice. And I think that so much of what you've discussed is they are practices, and they're just things we can integrate into our lives to support us on a daily basis, even just to kind of ground back in and to remember who we are and to remember the people who came before us. And I love that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
So I'm curious, is there anything else you like pressing on your heart that you want to share before I dive into wrap up questions?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate a little bit more. When we reclaim all the parts of ourselves that really makes us truly us, the ideas that you're here to bring just flow out of you. Like, Spiritual B School started off as Spiritual Business Circle about a year and a half ago. And it was just an idea of folks who are spiritual, but also want to do business and serve online or wherever. Most were online business owners, or I had an idea of an online business, to come together and do this balance between being spiritual and making money. And how do we do that in a way that doesn't perpetuate harm? You do marketing in a different way. And had I not embraced the ups and downs of my career in advertising, had I not really documented and looked back on like the harms and of my family of origin and gone on this lifelong, never ending healing journey of my own, and had I not ever become a coach and really owning my coaching and my ability to listen and like empathically and intuitively support others, I probably would not have created that. If I didn't believe that spirituality, creativity, abundance, and freedom were my pillars, my truth, the whole reason why I'm here, as I was a kid, then I wouldn't have done that. And I certainly wouldn't have evolved it into what Spiritual B School is today. So when you really reflect back and see who you are and have always been, like the ideas of what you can offer is there. It's the reason why I'm always telling people, which you might have heard on a different podcast, like, don't start with why. Like, don't listen to that guy. Don't start with why, because why will have you chasing the ills of the world and the issues of the world, trying to solve for stuff. Figure out who you are, and who you are as you continue to deepen in that you will want to put stuff out. You will naturally create, because we're creative beings, and the people who are attuned to that, who need that, who will be grateful for it, will come to you. They will feel what you are offering. It doesn't have to be reverse engineered.
Yeah. I really resonate with that. I actually, in an exercise this morning, it's interesting because I feel like so much of what you're talking about is really resonant to like what I've been doing today, which is pretty, I don't know, that's pretty ironic, I guess. But in an exercise I was doing with myself this morning, I was writing down like, where am I when I'm in flow? And I've done this exercise a few different times before, just trying to notice like when things come easily to me, what am I doing? What are my gifts?
Yes.
And I feel like that is such a beautiful place to start, because then when we are creating from that place, it serves people so much more. And I have to give credit. The first time I was asked that prompt was Madison Morgan. She asked me that first, and I've continued that practice. And I know you know Madison as well. And I feel like Madison pops up in my podcast a lot because she is such a beautiful, beautiful coach and human.
That's so funny. Think about serendipitous, serendipity, I guess I should say. So she and I just spoke today.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, yeah, so good. I love it. But yeah, I just love that idea of, instead of starting with your why, starting with like, where are you when you're in flow? Like, what are you doing when you're in flow, and just feel like you're like yourself. And that's such a beautiful place to start from.
Yummy.
Good stuff. So I am going to ask you my normal wrap-up questions, if that sounds good for you.
Sounds great. This has just been such a treat. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. I love it so much. We've dove in into so many good things.
I did. Which one is it? It sounds funny in my mouth.
It does. Yeah. Dove in is not like a normal word. I don't even know if that is the right word still, but whatever it is, we've tackled a lot. So my first question is, what is one way you slow down amidst our busy world?
Oh, I am a water baby through and through. So I get into the element of water. I take a shower. Sometimes I take a shower and then get in the bathtub. Bath on top of it. But there's something about that water that it does create ease. It allows me to just relax, to listen to myself. I put my ears under the water if I'm in the bath, and I can hear my heartbeat. And it's really where spirit meets me. So yeah, water.
Yeah, I love that. I think you're the first person who's actually talked about water before. A lot of times I get like breathing and walking and things like that. So I really love that. That's such a beautiful space as well, just to enter a state of complete silence. I feel like where you're just so present with yourself. That's really beautiful. And then my next question is, who are a couple of your current role models or current mindset expanders?
Yeah, I can't say role models, but I can definitely say mindset expanders. And Madison Morgan is definitely one of them. Nagara Kadumu has super been challenging me. Her background in traditional African religion, spirituality practices, and creativity and art world is just, every time I chat with her, she just can just cut through and the noise and just hold the space with me and for me. So I really, really honor her. honestly, I can say that's it right now, simply because I've been going through a process of reducing the amount of input coming into my life so I can just be with myself and my spirits and my work at the moment. So I guess the only other person, which isn't even a person, that I would add is nature. As soon as I can just sit on my patio and look at the sunset or rise, breathe, and listen and watch the trees, like it always takes me somewhere new. So I would say Madison, Niagara, and nature.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that. And it sounds like, if I'm interpreting what you're saying, is it sounds like you potentially are your own mindset expander as well, which I think is incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, I think I can give myself some credit for that. And shout out to my ancestors and my spirit guides, I think so. Because what do we say? We say that we have a universe inside of us. And here we are, like running around to other people's universes when we have all these black holes right here, So that was a good one, Megan. Like, I'm feeling that. Yeah.
Well, we often don't give ourselves enough credit when this whole conversation is about reclaiming your freedom. And I feel like when we are reclaiming ourselves, some of that is also remembering that we actually have incredible power within us. So when I was listening to you, I was like, oh, that feels really good. I love that.
Yeah, no lie. Thanks for that. Yep.
And then the last question is, how can we find and support you online?
Oh, that's delightful. You can actually just find me at ashleyjohns.com, ASHLEYJOHNS.com. If you're particularly interested in Spiritual Bee School, it literally is spiritualbeeschool.com. And I would love to grow in community with the folks who are listening. And I just also want to just send everyone who is listening at whatever time and space that you're engaging in this conversation, just peace and love into your heart and a grounding energy of connectivity in your feet. And thanks for being a part of this digital community. And to you, Megs, for inviting me into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. I loved the kind of tips that you had here, as well as just sharing about your work and what it is that you're doing in the world. I really appreciate it and admire it, and just really appreciate your presence here on this podcast episode today. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Reclamation Podcast. I hope it served you on your own reclamation journey, and know that I'm rooting for you all the way. If you want to learn more about the show guests, head to the website, thereclamationpodcast.com. And if you found value in the show, 5 stars is always appreciated. Good things are coming for you. Bye for now.